Welcome back for the launch of Season 5 of the Nassau Hockey Podcast. James, it's that time of year. I have to relearn where everyone is. A bunch of players moved. I'm already a little lost about it. And I wish I was joking. I feel like it takes until December. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that guy, Max Domi, plays in whatever team. I couldn't even tell you right now. I forgot already. But he's in maybe Toronto, somewhere else. There's a lot that happened over the first 5 or 6 days, I guess, by the time you're hearing this. Any of these moves, signings or trades, other than the ones that happened on Long Island, we'll get to that in a little bit, that stood out to you?
You mean in the NHL in general?
In the NHL in general, like anything that stood out, a team that stood out, that kind of jumped ahead. I have one in mind. I would be surprised if we had different ones.
So one of the ones that stuck out for me was Pittsburgh, and I was surprised by Pittsburgh's long-term commitment to Tristan Jarry, because they signed him.
Okay.
They signed him for 5 years at
He's so bad.
over like $5 million a year. The thing was, it was so late in the day that they signed him, and I didn't think there was any other options on the board for Pittsburgh as far as goaltending, that they had to fork over $25 million to a injury-prone goaltender who, yes, when he's healthy, he's good, he's on point, but he also has these moments where the other team gets in his head, or maybe even the crowd gets in his head, and suddenly he's not playing like this goaltender who you can depend on, where rather than he's this inconsistent goaltender who, you can't really rely on in a big moment. It was very odd to me to see how late in the day how much they paid Tristan Jarry, just because it felt like they could have retained him for way less. So there was that one that stuck out to me, and then the other one that stuck out to me.
There weren't a lot of options. I'll give them that. Where
hold on, there's still options, and they didn't have to. They're still they could have went the trade route if they had to, right? Maybe the free agent market. Though? No, I mean as far as
like they don't
prospects, maybe not, but they could have made something work to get someone like John Gibson. They were reportedly interested in acquiring him, hometown guy. He's from
he's
from Pennsylvania.
I mean, you give him a shot. He's got to be better than Jarry. Jarry had like the end of that season, but even this goes back years that he's been trouble for them.
And that's the thing. Like Jarry's been so much trouble, and they committed so much that I'm just confused. I'm just confused as to why they did that. And look, hopefully it works out for them. Hopefully, I mean, not that it matters to me, what Pittsburgh does, but they committed to a guy who, in my opinion, I think that's not going to work out real soon. Like real soon.
Oh no, I think they put themselves in a really bad position.
The other one that stuck out to me, another negative sense, was Miles Wood. I thought he was a good fit for the Islanders on a 2-3 year deal. He got 6 years to go to Colorado. I was really surprised by that, because I watch this guy every day, and look, I think he's a really good bottom six forward, but they committed 6 years to the guy. And we could talk about the Islanders' commitments later. Maybe it's echoing some similar sentiments here, but they committed 6 years to Miles Wood, who is injury prone. And although he's got good tools, he is prone to making costly mistakes. So I was just overall very surprised.
It's interesting. I did think he'd be a good fit on Long Island. He always gave the Islanders fits. But I think it's the case of the Stanley Cup champion and the two teams that made it to the final kind of making it that copycat league.
Right.
And teams like Colorado, who didn't do great in the playoffs this year, are like, oh, okay, we need a little more grit, a little more toughness in our bottom six. And wood is good. There's your
Yeah.
t-shirt idea. But I think adding somebody like that, maybe they need a little bit more speed. They were without Kadri and a couple other players. Not to say that he's a bottom six player, but like some of that extra little toughness and grit that you saw in Vegas and Florida that helped them kind of chip away. And even teams like the Islanders, where when they've made it deep on runs, it was this kind of grind them out style, and it wasn't always pretty. Vegas did everything. They matched everybody's tone that entire run. So I think those are good picks for surprises. Anything else that stood out to you?
Looking through the tracker, nothing else too surprising. I just there's still some good guys available. I guess if anything else on free agency day surprised me, or just leading up to free agency day, I knew that there was a new culture that was going to be coming for Nashville. I didn't see them buying out Matt Duchene. I understood trading Johansson. I didn't see Duchene coming. I thought that he was okay for what they were doing there.
So that was my surprise in general. There's a few, like a Jari thing, and I guess Duchesne in particular, but I was looking at things on the whole. So things like Boston, and that happened even before. I think we talked about that last week. Hall and Foligno being traded to Chicago from Boston. So you're seeing some teams do some crazy things. And you're like, oh, okay, this is really happening. Pacioretty signed in Washington. Back to the top of the show where I don't remember already. Pacioretty's not in Carolina anymore. Whatever,
No,
wherever
he did
he is.
sign with Washington. That's
He
correct.
did sign with Washington. But to me, Nashville stuck out on the whole with just, it felt like the sheer amount of moves, maybe only second to Toronto, who I felt like also made a ton of moves and still need to do stuff.
You know
Like
what?
they're working
If
on it,
we
like Nylander stuff and goalie, but whatever. I don't want to talk about Toronto. It's like Nashville and just the stuff that Trotz was doing and very clearly trying to get a certain culture together there and rid that locker room of whatever was ailing them since they made that deep run in 2017 against the Penguins all the way to the Cup final. They clearly needed something, and Trotz saw whatever the issue was, and he's on a path to fix it, at least how he sees it anyway.
Who was the team that you just said? Toronto. I think they made a lot of really good signings. I heard a really good analogy before, so I can't take credit for it, but Toronto always felt like the core four, right? It was always those four guys: Riley, Matthews, Tavares, and Marner. Or well, I'm forgetting Nylander too. Who's the core four? Whatever.
Tavares,
Let's call it
Marner, Nylander, Matthews.
Okay, so not Morgan Riley. So Riley's out of that. So regardless, it always felt like that the whole team centered around those four guys. They made some really good ads in Tyler Bertuzzi, Max Domi. Now it's
Ryan
become
Reeves.
more than Ryan Reeves. Yeah, Ryan Reeves. Look, you can hate the 3-year term that they gave him. You bet your ass no one's going to be taking runs at Austin Matthews now. Who's doing that?
Well, you
No
need
one.
to the players on that team, and I think the Islanders to a certain degree, even though they have Martin and Clutterbuck in the lineup, there weren't enough, as Steve Dangle calls it, confetti gloves, where someone's taking a run at your guy like a Pajot or whatever, and guys
Yeah.
are just like doing it. Like we lacked a little bit of that grit this year for whatever reason. I'm not blaming anybody. I felt like they just needed I don't know. They lost that touch in their game. Ross Johnson, of course, notwithstanding, because he was taking on two guys against the Penguins or somebody. He was on one knee and he was holding two people back. It
Yeah.
was an iconic photo if you've seen it. But yeah, I think Toronto made a lot of moves. That was surprising, but they needed to do it. That's why it didn't surprise me. Trotz just came into Nashville and it was like, oh yeah, O'Reilly, we're gonna get rid of these guys. We're committed to UC Saros as a goalie. Um, they have a decent. They added Luke Shen as well from Toronto.
Yeah, they did.
And they leave that they're still. I think what was really surprising. So they do all this stuff. They have buyout penalties or whatever. They still have almost $9 million this season. And then next year, they're committed. They have 4 forwards committed and 2 RFAs. So like it's a hard reset next year. The highest paid forward is probably one of the buyouts, but the highest paid forward is Ryan O'Reilly at 4.5. So Trotz like did a bit of work here to get that figured out. Roman Josi is the highest paid player on the team, followed by Ryan McDonough at 9 and just over 9.59 because they had to put their jersey numbers in there, and 6 3/4 with McDonough. But even that group is down to just 5 out of 7 guys. It looks like for next season. So there's even room there. Tyson Barrie is at 4.5. He's gone next season. He's 31. They might re-sign him for cheap. And then Carrier, I don't really know anything about him, but he's at 2.5. So they have a fairly young team. Only I guess the D is very, very old, so they need to figure that out. But Roman Josi, I still take him every single day. Ryan McDonough is still very, very good. Luke Shen's tough, a Scott Mayfield type. So it's interesting. There's gonna be, I think, some constant change, and I think they could still be good this season. So that's why it surprised me that they were making all these moves and they still looked pretty good. And then it's upsetting that the Islanders didn't get their hands on one of these players that were bought out, but we can talk about that a little bit after we talk about who the Islanders did sign. Right before that, really quick, just, rating of who did the best so far and who's done the worst so far. And are there teams that you think are in the messy middle? I think Pittsburgh might be in the messy middle area. Best, worst, meh? What do you got?
That's a really good question. Best, worst, meh. Well,
I feel like some teams didn't do anything. Like I didn't hear a peep out of Vancouver.
Yeah, there was definitely quite a few teams that did not do anything, or much at all. But I think Toronto's definitely one of my teams that did really well. I think I kind of like. No, because I criticized the Miles Wood thing before, but I like what they did with getting Ross Colton and taking a chance on Jonathan Drouin. But I can't. That's messy middle to me. Avalanche is messy middle with those acquisitions. I think the Rangers had a really weird free agency. They signed a bunch of guys to just $800,000 contracts that are past their prime.
I don't know who they are anymore.
Yeah.
I frankly, after the playoff run and all those players that they brought in, and then they left and they gave up these picks and assets, and they have these 2 first-round picks in Kakko and Lafreniere, and they have this amazing goalie. They still have Panarin and Zibanejad and Kreider and Trocheck. Like on paper, they look. I'm almost a little envious as an Islander fan because I don't know why I just respect that lineup. But then they play, and I'm like, I don't think there's anything there.
Yeah.
It looks much better on paper than in reality. And the Islanders almost the opposite, right? Even New Jersey's almost the opposite.
Well, yeah. No, not New Jersey. I think New Jersey on paper looks both really good because they are really good, but
they got to click though. Like they actually, there's a step that some players need to take, I think, for New Jersey next season, like a Timo
Yeah.
Meyer. You had made a point. I saw you wrote to somebody. He was there for like pretty much a cup of coffee in the regular season, and then never really got going in the playoffs. I think to the degree that everyone wanted. Certainly a lot of potential, but it's got to
Oh yeah.
click. It's got to click in New Jersey for him, and now
Yeah.
they're committed to him for 8 years. So right, so they have they have some time to figure it out, but they're young right now and relatively cheap still,
Yeah.
even given the amount of money that they've just given out. They're they're still pretty cheap, and they still have a lot of like that bottom six might be that next thing. Tyler Toffoli, adding him, I think that's a good move. It's all got to work, right? I think again, this isn't on paper right now. You can go through their highest paid players, even just the highest paid 5 or 6 players, and think, wow, that is a hell of a goddamn team.
Yeah.
But they have to make it work together. Like it's kind of like the Islanders. Like, oh, it was good last year. Why isn't it good this year? And there's just an X factor. Like something changed and it's not working, right? Andrew Burnett not being behind the bench, similar to Barry Trotz simply just not being around, may just change the dynamic enough where can Lindy Ruff actually do it on his own and bring along the assistants and have it make it work? Remains to be seen in New Jersey. And there's a new coach on in with the Rangers too, and Laviolette. So like a lot of questions with East River and Hudson River rivals.
Yeah, I hear that. I also think that there's, at least for New Jersey, like they brought in Travis Green. I thought that was a really good underrated hire. I think that's going to be something that, he gets a second chance to be back in the NHL after taking some time to reflect. A lot of people talk about how smart of a hockey mind a guy like Travis Green is. And I think that he was put in a situation in Vancouver that didn't really like he was kind of just thrown into a bunch of shit and it was like good luck, you sink or swim. And he sank just because it was too heavy of a burden to try and overcome. So I think that was a really
That's
good one.
Isles legend Travis Green.
Isles legend Travis Green, yes.
He's in that famous photo with Kasparaitis, and they're looking at each other like, "Are we really wearing these?"
Yeah,
in the locker room. It's incredible,
right? So, I understand the hesitation to commit to okay, this team is legit in New Jersey. But I don't know. I honestly, and this isn't just because I cover the team. I don't see a reason why they can't be Stanley Cup contenders.
Yeah, there's a lot of teams in their way. One of the teams that I thought did well, maybe on a more quiet level, was Carolina. They added a little bit of grit and bunting. They added a lot of skill
Yeah.
in Orlov.
Yeah.
And rounded some stuff out. They still have Brent Burns. They still have that, Brett Pesce. They're on the younger side outside of a few players. They did bring back Anderson, which I was a little surprised about, but they have Ronta still. They're a good team.
They brought both of those guys back. They were both free agents.
Oh, well, okay. I didn't even realize that. But so they bring both of them back. They're both well over 30. And I say that being almost 33 years old. So I don't like saying like Frederik Andersen's on the wrong side of 30 at 33, but yeah, they're not expensive if they needed to actually make moves. Ronta's at 1.5. Like you could move him. You just need to figure out what you're doing afterwards. It's not to mention like Svechnikov is still on IR, from last season. So like they're in a good place. So I liked where they added around the edges a little bit, and they're still committed for a little while longer to their top players. Sebastian Aho needs a deal after this year, though. Teravainen needs a deal after this year. Martin Nikas is an RFA after this season. So I think they add in the right places to kind of give a bunch of prove me deals to the players that got them pretty far and got swept against Florida. But I like them. I didn't think that was a mushy middle. I thought they did maybe not the best, but they did pretty good. And they, other than Nashville kind of doing a bunch of stuff, They're a mushy middle to me because I don't know what any of it means yet. Kind of like New Jersey. I on paper it's great. I just want to see it click. The Rangers too. Like I don't know who they are anymore. I know the Islanders are just weird, but there's a lot of teams that made moves like Carolina, Toronto, and Colorado. They made moves that made them more of who they are or who they want to be, and it was where they were lacking in certain spaces. But some of these other teams, I'm just not entirely sure what's going on here. Nassau Hockey is brought to you by DraftKings. New customers, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. Bet just $5 to score $150 in bonus bets instantly. That's code THPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Massachusetts, call 800-327-5050 or visit gamblinghelpline.ma.org. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Kansas, call 1-800-522-4700 on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. In West Virginia, gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. All games regulated by West Virginia Lottery. Please play responsibly. In partnership with Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling at 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 21 plus in most eligible states, but ages vary by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. 1 boost per eligible game. Opt-in required. Max bet $50. 10 plus legal requirement for 100% boost. Eligibility, wagering, and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/baseball terms. To Long Island we go, though. And talking about more of the same, we certainly got
just that.
Just that.
Just that.
And I'll preface this, and I was writing this morning a little bit. I'm not really concerned to where we start and end this portion, so we can kind of move seamlessly because it's going to wind up, we're going to bring a player up in a contract and start talking about the cap in general and what the team's payroll is and blah, blah, blah. And we're going to go into the implications and who else they can sign. So this is going to get a little messy. We're going to try to contain it, but I think we're going to wind up going all over the place. Did anything surprise you here of the 4? We'll call it the core 4 signings, although this is certainly not the core 4 Islanders. Because there were more signings as of Wednesday before we hit record. There were a bunch of signings during the day. So the core 4 that we're talking about today, as far as the signings are, Sorokin, Engvall, Varlamov, and Mayfield. Anything stand out? I mean, I think we know what the good one is. I think the Sorokin one's easy. It's almost not even worth talking about because it's the easiest one to just.
We should talk about it a little bit.
Well, no, I mean in the sense that like he deserved it. He's the Islanders goalie.
Yes,
and yeah, of course, 8 by a little more than 8. And
the one thing I'll say about that one is that he could have made more. Okay, he took, what was it, 8.25? Chef's kiss. Mwah. He could have had Vasilevsky money. He could have had 9.5, right? He could have had Carey Price money, but he gets 8.25 under market value. Chef's kiss, right? I don't understand the other 3. All 3 of them.
All 3. Even Varlamov at what we suspected was 2.5 by 3. He gets a little bit of a raise and an extra year or so.
Right.
You have
So
it. You take issue with that?
here's the thing. And I texted this to you the other day. Um, he went to free agency for a couple hours, right? Maybe it wasn't anything official. Maybe it wasn't anything, um, you know, too serious. But Carolina took serious interest in him, right? The word leading up to free agency was that he was going to sign 2 years, $2.5 million. I have to wonder if Carolina pitched something to him. He went back and said, "Look, I want to be here, but that's a lot of money that I'm going to leave on the table." And Lou just said, "Okay, here's an extra 2 years." Because I don't know, man. Paying a guy going into his age 36 season for the next 4 years. I get that he loves being on Long Island. I get that right now the relationship works, but there's a real chance that after 1 year of this contract, like age is going to catch up to this guy. Like they're committed to a backup goaltender now for 4 years. That I guess it's a manageable cap hit, but it's a long time to commit to somebody on a 35 plus contract, especially in net. So
Well,
it's very interesting, and I get the other side of the argument. Sorokin could play 60 games, but I think we're trying to decrease how many starts he has in a season to keep him fresh for the playoffs. We've had that conversation before.
yeah, and it's interesting too because, and this is just going because we didn't talk about the other ones,
No,
the,
we'll get
the
to
other
those
the other
next.
two contracts. But what I want to is like zoom out for a second is it's interesting that Lamoriello took a very specific approach to this. So there was a juxtaposition or a weird dichotomy between the what Lamoriello said on two different occasions. His reasoning, and Kerr said something very similar, and he pointed this out, was less than a month ago, Lamoriello said, well, 3 years ago, before the pandemic, we banked on the cap going up. And we shouldn't have made certain signings if we knew what was about to happen in a flat cap world.
Right.
So it's interesting that the team clearly is looking ahead at the cap going up possibly to 92 million by 25, 26. And 92 is a big number. It's considerably more. It's $9 million more, or just shy of $9 million more than it is right now. So it's interesting that he took that approach to describing what had happened and then is banking on it going up again. Granted, we're not going to go through a pandemic again. If I jinxed it, I'm sorry. But, right. But I find it hard to believe that it's not going to go up. But it's still interesting that he banked on it because any number of things could happen. Right. So, but given that the cap is going to go up, I'm surprised you take so much issue with Engvall at 3 million for 7 years. Is it just the term? Clearly the AAV is not a problem, right? That's pretty
No.
affordable. But to keep the AAV down, knowing that in less than 2 years it's going to be the cap's going to go up 10 million. So if you're 3 through 4, he's not great. Or I'm sorry, like at the latter end, the last 3 or 4 years of the contract, he's not great, but the first 3 or 4 is good. Is that really a big deal? Like you can move a $3 million deal. I think when I look at these deals, I say those are so movable at the end of them, it's almost irrelevant. And then you got to also think in the meantime, you're thinking about re-signing Lee, who's got 2 years left, and Nelson, or maybe Lee has 3 years left and Nelson has 2. But even those contracts are coming up. Yeah, Lee has it this year and 2 more years. Brock Nelson has it this year and another year. So that's $6 and $7 million that, I'm not saying are quote off the books as like we did with other players, but could look different on the other side. They'll be far into their 30s at that point. And unless Nelson keeps it up 30, 40 goals a season, which is entirely possible, he's only gotten better. Someone like Lee could come back for much cheaper. But that's a
Right.
hard deal to move by the time he's 34, 5, 6 years old. With some of these other guys, Engvall's 27. Yeah, maybe when he's 32, that deal doesn't look good, but for $3 million, you can figure out where to move him. There's room for him somewhere
Yeah.
in the league. So is there still an issue? Like
I feel like it's just one of those things where Lamoriello might have said to himself, like, I'm not gonna be running this team in the next 5 years. What do I care? If this is what it's gonna take to retain him for myself now, I'll do it.
Yeah, I've heard that argument from a few other shows as well to say like, oh, okay, I don't really care what happens at the end of this deal. Like, I'm not going to be the GM anyway. These still seem very affordable though. The highest is Mayfield at 3.5. And again, given what he brings to the table in relation to what Vegas did and what Florida did this year, that's probably why he got what he got. He may have, and you got to realize, Sorokin got 8 years. He signed. He's still an island player. Mayfield and Engvall were technically UFAs. So as you said before, they may have heard other deals, even very briefly. Although I think that
Right.
everything was kept, close to the vest. They still may have gotten a deal or two that came through that said, okay, you got to do full 7 years. I still think the AAV is okay. I'm not. Don't get me wrong. None of these numbers are my favorite thing, but at the AAV, I can swallow it. They're movable later in their contracts.
I could understand, and you're right about the AAV. I'm okay with the AAV. I just wonder, and again, look, if the cap goes up and Engvall in year 4 is only making $3 million, and that's equivalent to today's 1.5 million, great. That can probably be moved, but I don't know. At least right now, it was just shocking. Maybe that's what it is. It was just shocking to me because I had said to you, if they commit to Engvall 4x4, we were both uncomfortable with that. That's 7 years. You
Yeah,
hope, you
$3 million.
hope there's a debate as to whether this guy's a second line player, and maybe he's not. And I understand that he fit really well with Palmieri and Nelson. They only have 2 years left each. What do you do after that?
I think that's where you deal with it at the time. And if he's a third line player, further into the deal, we've seen cheaper guys play, and he might be a fourth line guy later on. You got to think that fourth line
Right.
is going to keep changing. Parise's still not back. Wallstrom is still not signed, and there's a chance that there's a move to bring in somebody else. I think for the long-term health of the team, the AAV helps, right? Each season, as the cap goes up, these are smaller percentages of the cap. If you need to buy somebody out, it's not that much. If you need to trade
Right.
them, it's not that bad. I think I'm not worried. I'll take the GM approach of it's not my problem in a few years. It will be eventually. We're fans. We're not going anywhere. But I'm not worried about years from now. I can barely think of what this team's actually going to do on the ice this season coming up. Forget about in 2 or 3 years from now. I like that the Horvats and the Sorokins and the Barzels are locked up. And there's even a few other players that I really like that are still around for a few more years. But I'm not worried about where Engvall's playing. I want to see the three of them hit it off this year again with Nelson and Palmieri and just play well,
Yeah,
and that first
that's
line,
fair.
whatever. So like, I'm not super concerned about this long term, even though it's a little ugly, because it still gives Lamoriello a little flexibility. I don't really know what that looks like though, because there's the Brinkat
Well, hang
rumors.
on, hang on.
Go ahead.
Before we get there, can we talk about Mayfield? Because we talked a lot about Engvall for 7 years, but Mayfield got 7 years too. His
I'll
position is
say
different. He's a defenseman.
I'll say that's my least favorite one.
Okay.
That's easily my least favorite one.
I think I could agree with you on that.
Varlamov is fine. He'll just play less and less of a role. And we'll see if the hot tub's too hot for Sorokin. There's something to be said here. I think people were giving, it's funny, people outside of the Islanders sphere were very quick to call the Sorokin deal great and the other one's not great. Really quick. And I think people really close to the team saw a Sorokin that broke down a little bit in that playoff series and saw, I don't want to say the worst of Sorokin, but certainly not his best. So on the heels of not his best series or 6-game stretch, to get that deal, you really hope that that was a glitch and that he can turn it on much better on the other side of all of this. So I think it's easy to say that. With Mayfield, I don't know. I think it was his style was at a premium, and the only way to keep that AAV down was to extend him for a long time.
Yeah, you're probably right about that. It's just really tough to see that 7-year term because
Real bad, real tough.
by year 4, I think that's going to be an immovable contract.
It could be. I'm trying to hang on to percentage of the cap. Someone will take him if they really want him as a 7th defenseman later in that deal. Hell, he might even be the Islanders' 7th defenseman. There's still a lot of possibilities of where that can go. I don't know how the Islanders do it at this point. I'm not even paying attention to any of the speculation, although I do want to talk about DeBrincat simply because he's a test case, right? Not necessarily because I think anything's there. We've learned how we can get bitten by that. But yeah, Mayfield might be my least favorite one. Maybe followed by Varlamov, just because I don't really like. He needs to. Last season was better, but he needs to show he can keep doing that even at a bare minimum. And Sorokin really needs to be able to step up too and be consistent. He's definitely been really good. He was a Vezina runner-up, but is at the we can't sit here and say, oh, the Islanders just need to get in, and then they get in and get run over, and your goalie can't keep up. So they have some of that to prove if that's really their identity of, sure, we're going to be up and down all season, but once we get to the playoffs, you don't want to play us. They really lost that this year. So they need to regain that in a big way. And that's a lot on Sorokin, unfortunately, for him. It's a lot on him. So he needs to be ready. And a lot of that relies on Varlamov and the coaching staff really giving Varlamov the games, because they straight up did not do that. So maybe that's a red flag too, to your point. The coaching staff was just riding Sorokin. And granted, the team had like a 650 plus winning percentage after a certain point in the season, after they got Horvat at the very least. And they rode that all the way to at least the first round. I'm not sure that's a lot to hang your hat on, but at least it's something. They made the playoffs in 4 or 5 years with Lamoriello. I guess it's something to hang your hat on.
Yeah.
But did you want to talk about DeBrincat a little bit?
Well,
or a first line winger signing guy?
Before we talk about DeBrincat, there's something that happened today in some minor signings, right? I know you were moving. I don't know if you saw these happen. Julien Gauthier, former New York Ranger, got a 2-year contract on a one-way deal for $787,500. They also brought in Brian Pino and Kuhlman, former Winnipeg Jet, right? So Pino came from New Jersey, Kuhlman came from Winnipeg. Those are two-way deals. Those are depth guys. They'll be buried. It's the Gauthier one for me, right? He is, I think, going to play for the Islanders, right? Now we take that one step further. We look at the cap space, right? After signing Gauthier, they have $387,500 in cap space. Now, what happens if you bury um what happens if you bury Ross Johnston contract? Nothing. Nothing changes, right?
And Kuhlman's
No
also on
one.
the roster per cap friendly right now.
Yeah, so when he goes down, I think they have
So it'll be
two
like
and
a little
change,
like yeah,
right?
one and change. Yeah.
So a couple things here. A couple things come to mind, right? Number one, I'm trying to think of what. Let's start with Zach Parise.
Yeah,
He's,
right.
I
Oh my god, I
think,
totally forgot about that.
I think Zach Parise. The writing is on the wall there. He's probably retiring. There's no money for him. And look, maybe this was a contingency plan. Maybe the offer is still on the table. You let me know. I'll figure it out. Lou to Zach, right? But you're losing now 23 goals on a $750,000 contract. Ouch. Is Cal Clutterbuck coming back, right? Because I wonder if Parise does come back, or if they sign Oliver Wahlstrom, who is unsigned right now as an
Oh my
RFA.
god. Yeah.
Where does Clutterbuck fit into this equation with Julien Gauthier on the roster now, right? That leads me to my last point in, like I said, Wahlstrom, who needs to sign. Does he get put into a package for a trade to be made later? This is all speculative. I know that and this isn't me reporting it, this is just what's out there. The Islanders are trying to see what they can do to acquire DeBrincat, right? As of yesterday, Jeff Marek said it was down to just two teams, Detroit and the Islanders. So I wonder if these minor signings to bring in Gauthier, Kuhlman, and Pinot, um, the two latter are depth, but the Gauthier one stands out to me with no cap space, right? What's the one thing that Lamoriello continues to say he's going to do? Hockey trades, right? He didn't get it done last summer. He got it done at the deadline, right? This summer, he's already done something different in announcing the trades. I'm sorry, announcing the free agent signings, right? We didn't have to wait till September, right? And although that he brought back his own,
What a revelation.
what a revelation, right? He already did something different. He announced his signings. What if there is a trade that is in the works here? Gauthier is now in as part of the depth that they're going to need when they trade, let's say, Oliver Wahlstrom. And one other thing that Lou continued to talk about, post trade deadline and at his press conference this summer, was the depth they have at the center position. Well, if anybody's being traded, who's the odd man out at the center position? It's JG Pageau, right? So what if we see some sort of trade, and it could be for DeBrincat, or it could be for, and listen, this is speculative. This is just throwing, something at the wall and seeing if it sticks.
Yeah.
William Nylander, who just submitted a 10-team no trade list. Are the Islanders on that? Who knows, right? What if something bigger is happening here? Because all of these signings today, the little amount of cap space they have, that there's no way in my mind
They don't even have the roster space at this point.
they're not going into the season
nor
like
the
this,
dollars.
right?
No, I find that hard to believe. I do wonder about Clutterbuck and Martin. Even Johnston, I really don't. God, that one hurts more by the day.
Yeah.
I really don't understand that one. But to your point about Wahlstrom, and I put this in the notes because having all these other deals signed early and announced, and then having the second wave of three players Also signed Julian the Goat and these other two.
Julian the Goat.
Yeah, I can't wait. We're coining it now before the season because he's inevitably gonna fight somebody and score a goal in a game, and he's gonna be an Islanders legend forever.
Tweet it.
Thread
it.
it. Tweet it out. Thread it. Yeah, we're on Threads. That's been hockey. Oh my god, you made me lose my train of thought. I guess I wonder about Wahlstrom being part of a package, and I speculated this in the notes just to say he's not signed yet, and he's an RFA. If there's interest from Ottawa, just because the Islanders' name is attached to a DeBrincat at this point, does Pajot, who I believe has some protection, a modified no trade clause, would he go back to Ottawa
Well, he's
with
from there,
Wahlstrom?
so
Back to Ottawa with Wahlstrom and a second-round pick for DeBrincat? Is that even enough? I don't even know what they're asking for DeBrincat. I imagine
so the thing is,
but then they need to sign him, so that's only $5 million freed up. Granted, Carson Kuhlman gets put down, so that's another $775. But then you still need to come up with another $2 million for whatever deal you're going to sign with DeBrincat. And does he want to sign a short-term deal because he knows the cap's going up? So you're going to do a 3x7, a little bridge deal. I don't know what was DeBrincat making before in Ottawa. Actually, I think his qualifying offer is like $9 million.
His qualifying offer, I can tell you right now.
I think it's really expensive.
DeBrincat qualifying offer is $9 million. He was making 6.4 last year, so he's going to arbitration. So that means he'll make at minimum 85% of that, right? I don't foresee him getting his full $9 million if he goes to, or if they get to arbitration and don't agree to something before they get there, because he was a multi 40 goal scorer before he got traded to Ottawa. And last year, albeit still a good season, he scored 27 and 70 overall, 66. 27 and 66. So, look, 41-78, 41-76 in years prior. He was he's also a 30 goal scorer in between. You're looking at a guy who knows how to fill the net, and he did so significantly less in 22-23. I don't foresee him getting that full 9 if it gets to arbitration. I think he can probably get as low as 85%. Not a math guy, but I'm thinking that's what, 7.5, maybe a little more. And if the Islanders, let's just say for argument's sake, the Islanders trade for him and they sign him to an 8x8, everyone's happy.
Yeah, it's 7.65.
Okay, I was close.
In that neighborhood. Yeah, it was better than I thought. For what are you, like an English teacher or history teacher or something?
Or like I write words for a living too, so.
Yeah, sure. You're a teacher. I'm just kidding. Yeah, so I think having said that and going through the math, which is probably the most uninteresting thing in the whole world, even giving up Pajot, you're still down $3.5 million or $3 million, something in that neighborhood, to just get him on the payroll. I think that's Clutterbuck and Martin then.
Right.
That's $3 million. Unless you just weren't, that could have been Engvall too. And you were going to sign some depth here or whatever. It's a little complicated to your point. It left a lot more questions than it did answers. And the title for the episode that I had was Predictable Yet Surprising. And I'm questioning that a little bit because I think it's more along the lines of predictable and more questions. Like, we knew things were coming, but it really didn't give us any more clarity as to what this team is going to look like when we go into the season next year. I think it's a lot like the Rangers for a second, where I have no idea who they are. For the Islanders right now, I don't know what this is. This is, yes, they added Bo Horvat. Yes, Bailey is gone. But it just doesn't feel different enough. And Engvall's staying. It doesn't feel different enough for like actual progress to have been made. And I didn't see anybody in particular have a great season that's sticking around. Granted, Parise was that player that I'm really excited for seeing them again. I'm interested in the Engvall situation. I want to see it. He had the best stretch of his career with the Islanders. I kind of need to see more proof of concept before I get too excited. It may not be worth getting too excited about. And that deal could look really good right away or awful right away.
So you just said Josh Bailey. I don't think we talked about him yet.
We did quite a bit with Dan and Mike.
No,
and
but
if you missed that
since he
episode,
actually has been bought out, don't think we spoke about it.
What's his situation? Has there been any movement there?
So he was bought out by the. I'm sorry. So he was traded
to Chicago.
I don't think we spoke about this. He was traded to Chicago.
I think we did. I think
did
we
we
knew
talk
that.
about this?
It was before free agency. Because that first buyout window ended on the 30th, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we did. Regardless, he got bought out by Chicago. Now he's a free agent. No one signed him. Does he retire? Is that an option? Do you see him come back to the Islanders in a management role? Like he did say that, Long Island is home. So whenever I'm done playing, we will be living there. Does that happen early? I wonder.
He may get Jerome McGinley. I understand they're very different players, but it might be forced retirement by no one signing him. That very well may be what the end of his career would be, and that's awful. That's awful.
Yeah.
It would have been better somehow if he just didn't play the last year, but I think he had hopes.
Yeah.
And he probably still does in some capacity. It must be really tough. And it'll, we spoke about this with, like I said, with Mike and Dan of Lighthouse. And if you missed that episode, definitely go check it out. There's a lot of emotions on our side of things. I can only imagine what it's like for him to be essentially let go by the only team, the only employer you've ever known.
Yep.
In your entire life. And it stinks. I read a lot of good pieces about him from the fans' perspective and kind of sitting in their feelings about him. But it was good for the moment of seeing him not on the payroll anymore, on cap friendly, and that $5 million going away. Because it needed to happen, and it stinks that even more needs to happen. I like Pajot too. He was part of a more recent kind of upswing with the team and playoff runs and things. He was really important. I think the magic wore off a little bit with him, but yeah, it's tough to see those players kind of go through it. I don't think there's a player as hated and loved at the same time. Pantorno wrote a good piece about why he's part of the Islanders Hall of Fame, why he should be considered part of the Islanders Hall of Fame. It was hard to argue against any of that. He was so frustrating in between those moments, though. He scored two huge overtime goals against the Penguins in two different series. Was around for everything in between. I'm happy we're on this side of it because I'd rather be upset about the end than continue struggling through him being on the team, if that makes any sense.
100%. T-shirt idea. Breakups stink.
Yeah. I'll listen back and to all of our T-shirt ideas from this episode and try to make it happen. I do really want to do merch.
That's
I know
an Office reference.
Oh. over my head for a second. I do really want to do merch though. I know I talked to you about that.
You did,
Um,
and I loved your idea. If you want to just do a quick aside here,
yeah,
do you want to share that idea?
I kind of want to just do hardcore band kind of merch, but NHP style.
Love it.
So like a wolf biting down on a hockey stick and it's breaking,
Give
and
it to
just
me.
Nassau hockey above and below. Um,
Like a
I
split
guess I
person
would
thing.
do it if it was made to order. So like you ordered it and we only made that much. Like each run was very limited, so that it wasn't $1 billion, and we didn't really have to keep track of it. Because even though I'm moving into a house, I do not need my office filled up with boxes of stuff and mailing it out to everybody. I very much appreciate you all, but I do not want to be spending my summer evenings, or any evenings for that matter, mailing out a bunch of merch. But I would like people to have stuff if they like it. I don't even have one. I think you have one. I have a glass that someone made like personally for me.
Yeah,
But
that's
you
nice.
actually have one of our crew necks.
I do. Yeah, I do somewhere in my drawers that I need to clean out desperately. But
And it was our old logo too.
yeah, our old logo. I do really like our new logo. Actually, I would love a hat like this with just our logo on it. I would love
All right. Now I'm gonna look up embroidered like crew necks and hats or something.
Let's go, dude.
Uh I'll figure it out. I gotta get somebody to draw up the logo for me. I have a bunch of tattoo artist friends. Maybe I'll ask somebody if if you if you all want merch, let us know. Maybe it'll push me in that direction.
Yeah.
Um, maybe we'll have it for the start of the season or something. I'd love to partner with somebody on it too, like somebody that is already kind of doing some cool merch that we can kind of be a part of about the Islanders. Um, I don't know. I guess there are people out there. I'll figure something out. We kind of covered quite a bit here regarding Clutterbuck and Martin off the books next summer, the cap going up, some of these deals looking a little bit better as we go. I was really surprised at some of these signings today, as you already brought up. Um, the Gauthier, right? Is that how you say it? Did I make that up?
I
I
think it's
just
Gautier, but you might
Gauthier.
be
I just
right.
like Frenched it up real hard.
Eh.
I remember him from the Rangers. Nothing terribly exciting, but that name stuck out to me right away. I was kind of surprised to see that today. Um, it's funny, and I guess DeBrincat and some other players that might be a place where we can end the show here. You and I were texting the last 2 days, and every time we brought up a player, they got signed immediately. So we're like, Duchesne would be nice, I guess. Immediately got signed.
Yep.
Um, Players getting traded. Like, I don't know, maybe Pacioretty. Like, did they just kind of do it? Nope, no one. So it was just kind of like I don't
I
even know if he
texted
fit in a guy
you.
like that.
I Andy and Rono, the stat card guys, tweeted out this guy is still unsigned. Would make a really good 3C. And I texted you, this is the guy, right? They should get this guy. He would be a really good 3C if they end up making this bigger deal where Pajot goes the other way. It was Evan Rodriguez. I shit you not.
Right.
30
Immediately.
seconds later, 30 seconds later, gone. Gone.
Yeah, I wish that was an exaggeration.
He was a
Where
Florida Panther.
the time between texts. Oh, Evan Rodriguez would be really nice. Never mind.
That was the literal time between texts.
Yeah, that was tough to swallow. There was a bunch of really good players. I think there still are, and maybe it's RFAs. And we've said it may be a lot of Lamoriello's season to shine on the trade market, and it may just be getting creative. And um, there are some teams with some room out there, so it's not
Certainly.
impossible for a Pajot. Which again, unfortunately, I think that's the guy to move. I don't know who they fill the 3C with, but I guess you just figure it out as you go. You just bump Cizikas up and figure out your fourth line, um, looking a little bit different, which I don't think would be the end of the world. Um, are there any players left aside from DeBrincat that are on your radar that you think would look good in Islanders uniform?
William Nylander.
That's a serious trade, and he's asking for quite a bit too. So that's you're moving.
But who
I
drafted
don't know.
him?
Right, but where are you finding $9 or $10 million? That's a different thing than even. It's still in the neighborhood of what DeBrincat is asking for, and he's performed in the playoffs. Let's not forget that Nylander has been good as much as the Maple Leafs have faltered. He has been the bright spot, and he scored 40 goals last season.
Right.
Where do you fit him in? Like
you make room for William Nylander.
I don't disagree. I think there's just actual logistics. I think is really easy to say that, but yeah, like in theory, of course, you make room for him, but that's Pajot and another $5 million player.
Well, I'll say this: you can go 10% over the salary cap until puck drop on day one of the regular season. So there is time to get that figured out.
That's not wrong. It's still a lofty situation. That really puts the pressure on. And Lou would never announce that and approach other teams with the knowledge that he's over 10% and needs to move somebody. I'm not sure that's exactly how he would want to.
That's a good point.
Operate. Now, it doesn't mean that a deal in theory wouldn't be made for him to, or a handshake deal to be made about a trade for him to just wait to see if he can actually do it. I don't know how long Toronto actually waits around for that. The honest, like the assets, it kills me because I just want like a Dufour or a Durando or somebody to hit.
Yeah.
And Ishkakov to, all right, you're going to trade Wahlstrom and Pajot to get DeBrincat, whether directly or indirectly. How many of those can you really give up? And can you just have one of them hit, please? If you're going to give up Wahlstrom, can one of those Bridgeport players hit and fill out your third line or something?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I did see something the other day on Twitter. It was a screenshot of the Islanders drafts between, I think it was like 2017 and 2020. And the only players to this point to actually hit is Noah Dobson. And that's it. Like, we're talking 6 times 3, 18. 18 players they drafted. One of them hit.
Yeah, and you're still struggling with like a Holmstrom. You really don't know what you have it as far as an NHL player in Dufour or Ishkakov.
Wahlstrom
Yeah,
still.
Wahlstrom's still for the most part. Maggio, who's brand new, has not played professional yet. You know what you don't have? Koivula and some of these other players. Andrioff clearly is not a. I mean, he could be the fourth line center if you have to move Cizikas up. But surrounding them, other than Fashing, and if you're not going to bring Parise back and you're going to use Gauthier in one way, or whatever his name is, Gauthier, it got me all screwed up. I don't know what that looks like now. Like I don't know what their bottom six looks like, because for now Lee is on the first line, whether you like that or not, with Horvat and Barzell.
Yep.
So you still need to figure out that bottom six in a real serious way. If Pajot's got 1 foot out the door and you're not sure about what any of those players look like, and not by his own volition, I suppose, Pajot, just you got to free up space somehow if you're going to add in the top six. Wahlstrom's still not re-signed, so that's a big question mark on the third line. If you're going to open up more space, that could be Clutterbuck and Martin. For now, that fourth line stays intact. But it's Fashing and Pajot on that third line with a big question mark. I mean, maybe Durando. I'd love to see that. He's an RFA after this year. He's still 24 years old. Would love to see a Durando there. That would make a lot of sense to me. Again, let it hit. Let him do it. He played fantastic. He didn't produce, but he played fantastic. He was far from a liability out there. But we'll see. Like you said, Gautier's around. Jeez, these are so many players. They're at the 23 man at the roster limit. Granted, one of those players they probably have 22, 23 because there's no chance Kuhlman, not to be confused with Kuhlman, is going to be around. But his cap hit isn't the problem there. It's just the roster space. So you're not saving a whole lot, even though you open up a roster spot. So it's, to your point, I think this brought up more questions than answers so far. Any kind of closing thoughts here? Any other players you think the Islanders have their eye on?
Tarasenko hasn't made a decision yet.
That
this
became more
morning,
appealing, huh? All of a sudden?
Yeah, this morning, he was there was talk that he was going to the Hurricanes. I think it was like close. I can confirm that the league knew it was in the works. Something happened between, I think, maybe Friday and well, I'm sorry, what's today? Wednesday? I'm thinking something happened between Saturday and today where Tarasenko fired his agent today
Saw that.
and he's got new representation. So not too sure what went down there. But it was looking close to Carolina enough that the NHL themselves were getting ready for that announcement. And then last minute fell through. Very interesting turn of event there. So the word is that he turned down, though, like a significant offer, like $5.5–6 million a year on a multi-year contract. That's a scary one for me. If they commit that much to a guy like him, who, look, he's been healthy as of late, but he's on the wrong side of 30, and no question he can score, but it's just,
Did he
you got to
impress you
be
with the
careful.
Rangers?
I thought he
You
was
watched him
good.
in that playoff series.
Yeah, I thought he was good. Of any of the of any of the trade deadline acquisitions, he was the better one.
Do you think he's worth a 1-year deal?
Yes, for 1 year, sign me up. I'm taking that.
I think that's kind of where I'm at too. Maybe 2.
But I
Like,
don't
give
think
him
he
the
wanted
security,
that.
I guess. That may just be where things kind of fall. He's older than Taylor Hall and some of these other players. And John Klingberg it eventually worked out, although I think he got, and that's another player Toronto got too. He eventually got half, right? He's a $4 million, maybe a little bit more than a $4 million player now. He was asking for 8x8 from Dallas. He took the 1-year deal in Anaheim, kind of like Hall did it in Buffalo. And then it's very different on the other side. So maybe it's not very appealing to him to do that 1-year deal, because if he has a bad season, it may not work
Well,
out.
right, and that might be it. What about you? Any free agents or guys out there that you think maybe they should take a chance on?
I have been thinking more about Tarasenko. I think the deals are through trades, because one way or another they need to relieve some of that cap space. I'm just not really sure who's available that is even mildly interesting. Bergeron, Kane, Krejci, Tarasenko, the top 4 UFAs as far as points from last season. None of them broke 60, by the way. After that, on the goal scoring side of things, maybe Thomas Tatar, who's 32. That I don't think that's a first line signing though. He didn't even break 50 points last year. You're looking for a 20 goal scorer, someone that has that potential. I don't even think there's anybody, not like a Jonathan Taves or a Kessel or things like that, that are even capable of that anymore. There really aren't players available. It definitely confirms it's the summer of Lou as far as the trade is concerned, where I think that's his strength and what he's done really well with the Islanders for the most part. No one really stands out. It might just be more of an RFA thing. Is Vince Dunn still not signed? I would say if you're going to do anything, leave your forwards right and figure out your D in a different way.
Yeah.
I'd be happy with that kind of thing. But DeBrincat obviously stands out. Um, you know, I don't know what the deals are with Anaheim with like Troy Terry. I find it hard to believe they're just going to give up on a player like that and just get rid of him and try to and trade him for a Wallstrom who's very, very much not proven at all yet. There aren't a lot of players available that are 20 goal scorers. Shane Pinto in Ottawa, Trevor Zegras, who's probably not going anywhere. Gabriel Velarde in Winnipeg. But again, you're not talking. DeBrincat is the only even RFA other than Zegras as a first line guy that I would even consider giving up serious assets for.
Yeah.
And it's assets not just to get that player, but to relieve the cap space you already have.
Yeah. I really think, and look, we've been here before, we've seen this before. The Islanders are in on the big name, and they fall short on the hometown team, right? That's where DeBrincat's from, Detroit. Um, but something's got to give at some point, and there's a certain line Steve Eisman doesn't cross, and he's already apparently balked at some of what DeBrincat wants. Maybe it's not part of his plan or his vision. I think he's certainly worth every penny. So I would not be upset with the Islanders giving up significant assets for a guy like DeBrincat. He checks all the boxes. He's like the only guy other than maybe William Nylander who's out there and available. He'll probably come cheaper than Nylander, and the Senators paid a first, second, and third round pick last year for him, and he performed significantly worse than he did in his 41 goal season. I don't think that he'll come that expensive. I think you bite the bullet on losing a Pajot. You If you have to, send Wallstrom with him. You bring in DeBrincat, and if you can figure out a way to create more cap space, I also said this to you the other day, and you said I don't know what that means, but it was a typo. Pius Suter, he was an Islander once before. He came in on a PTO, didn't end up making it. I think he went back overseas, but reinvented himself, came back, and he's had a pretty good NHL career thus far. Perfectly good third line center. I think that would be a really, really good body of work for Lamoriello this summer, even with some of the long term contracts that he has committed to.
Yeah, definitely some more work. I'm not sure about next week's episode. I have to get all my new gear set up in my new place. But if there's anything breaking, we'll definitely make sure to cover it. I think we're just in a waiting mode. The predictable yet surprising name does stick pretty well. But like I said earlier, it's just so many more questions.
Right.
This has not settled anything. It's really just made things more muddy. And I like your point. Lou definitely has a lot of work cut out for him.
He definitely does.
Well, what do you say we wrap this up and hold out hope there's more to come?
Go for it.
Please rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at Nassman Hockey. I apologize for the fireworks in the background. My neighbors are insane and have professional grade Grucci fireworks. Apparently, they do this for a week after and during July 4th. Soon enough, I will not live in Crazy Town anymore, where people have fireworks friggin' every single day. It's hard to go to sleep. You can find James' work at New Jersey Hockey Now. Not going to make that mistake again. New Jersey Hockey Now. I don't even have it written down. And the fourth period. And make sure to subscribe to Isles Fixed for their daily newsletter throughout the summer, especially as news is breaking. James, bring us home.
Until next time, everyone, follow us on Threads.